From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, deliberately flooding a field to try to make a better crop.
Stay tuned, folks. Coming up, we're going to talk values on 150 horsepower used tractors.
Are the top-end yields a goner?
Soybeans, maybe a little bit of a question mark, but not much.
And farmers facing tough questions after Hurricane Michael.
There's really no words to describe pain and the depression and the despair that you feel.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. We'll be getting a better idea later today about how devastating Hurricane Michael was to Georgia's cotton crop. The new crop progress numbers come out late Monday, but already there are signs of trouble, with almost 50% of producers reporting last week the state's cotton crop was poor. Georgia's cotton industry pumps about $1 billion per year into the state. That number expected to be much lower this year. John Holcomb from the Georgia Farm Monitor talked with one farmer in southwest Georgia who's wondering what he'll do next.
This is Preston Jimerson. Preston and his wife are farmers in southwest Georgia who, like most farmers in the region, took a huge hit from Hurricane Michael. This year's potential record-breaking cotton crop gone as if in a blink of an eye.
Before the storm hit, we had what was estimated to be the best crop that anybody has seen in southwest Georgia in over 20 years. And we were all looking at the potential to make a profit, and not only make a profit, but be prepared in future years for an event like this. We're going to have the money to put back so that we could weather a storm. Unfortunately, the storm came a year too early.
Now, instead of their most profitable year, they're looking at a year of total loss.
Now, instead of being able to put money back, we're looking at pretty much an equal loss, We're looking at going from a potential profit on our farm of $300,000 to $400,000 to having to come out of pocket $300,000 just to be able to operate next year. And those numbers are based on the fact that we think at this point we may have 50%. If we get in the fields and there's not 50% there, the number easily climbs to $500,000. And with us only being in operation for 6 years, the reserves aren't there for that. We'll be refinancing everything we have and remortgaging what we just paid off and starting over like it's year one again.
Preston says it's a feeling unlike any other to go from such a high to such a low in such a short amount of time.
To know that as of Wednesday morning, we had picked till midnight, and we had started picking at 4 in the morning. And we had pretty well picked around the clock every hour that it wasn't raining on us, and know that we had a record crop 1 minute and wake up the next morning and it's all gone. And you go from looking at paying for your kids' college to figuring out how you're going to pay your house note is devastating. And there's really no words to describe the pain and the depression and the despair that you feel to just have to look at your family and ask them to just be there for the ride because you're starting all over.
Hurricane Michael came ashore in the Florida Panhandle, but many in that area are still wondering when the power will come back on. They're also still without sewer and water. The problem is rural areas of Bay County. That's the same county that Panama City Beach is located. There are about 180,000 people in the entire county, and according to the census, 14% of people in that county live in poverty.
So after the storm cleared, we came out and we saw this destruction, and we just didn't know where to turn, how to turn. We just didn't have any answers. And when they started telling us that there was help rolling in on the way, it was all headed to the beach. They came down 231, went right past all of us.
Mark Ward has set up a bathing station at his house for people. He's using a hand pump for well water. If you want to help those affected by Hurricane Michael, we put a link to it on our website, agday.com. Now, 60% of U.S. sweet potatoes are grown in eastern North Carolina, but farmers there have seen yields decimated now by 2 hurricanes. Heavy rains saturating fields just ahead of harvest. Hines Family Farms near Selma says early estimates put losses at around 15%.
The sweet potato crop it's hit or miss. We have spots that are really good. Then we have spots that we're completely submerged underwater, and that will be rotten, and we're just leaving them in the field. I mean, it's not worth picking up. It's just you grab it and it's mush.
Caroline says they won't know for sure how much damage is in the field until the potatoes are harvested and packed. The biggest issue may show up later in the form of a shorter storage life. The USDA is buying sweet potatoes as well. It says it plans to buy them for several food banks. Now, it didn't say how much it would be buying, but said it would reveal those details soon. It's thought the new NAFTA could help America's dairy farmers, but some Federal Reserve banks say that's not the case. A report by the Minneapolis Federal Reserve says gains made by the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement are, quote, too small and too far in the future to help dairy farmers. Now, the report says a substantial number of dairy operations have exited the business since the beginning of this year. Dairy was a fixture of the NAFTA renegotiation effort as concessions from Canada were long sought by the industry. Now, before the new agreement, U.S. dairy farmers faced strict import quotas and tariffs. Under the new agreement, which still needs congressional approval, Canada agreed to drop restrictions, and American producers will be able to supply up to 3.6% of Canada's dairy market. And while the old NAFTA remains in place, there are still metal tariffs on Canada and Mexico. So when will those be lifted? A senior Mexican trade official says no talks have been scheduled with the U.S. on lifting those. U.S. trade officials reportedly want Canada and Mexico to agree to a hard cap on the amount of steel and aluminum it could ship to the U.S., but Canada has said it would not accept that. Canada's foreign minister and the incoming Mexican foreign secretary met last week. Those two officials calling for the tariffs to be lifted as soon as possible. Both countries have retaliated against the U.S. with tariffs of their own on U.S. farm goods and other products. Concerns about African swine fever in China apparently won't have much impact here. Politico reporting in its morning agriculture newsletter that the issue won't affect U.S. pork exports in the short term. That's because the outbreak has only hit a small fraction of China's massive pork industry. Now, China is the world's largest producer and consumer of pork, and it has had to kill off hundreds of thousands of pigs. But economists say if China started importing pork, it would turn to Canada or the EU first rather than pay U.S. tariffs. The U.S. has lifted most restrictions on pork coming from Poland. That following concerns about African swine fever. The restrictions remain on 2 of 16 plants. The U.S. has been a key destination through the years for Polish pork. Lots of farmers working late in their fields to bring in the harvest. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman has more in today's Crop Comments.
Some beautiful nights for harvesting in parts of the country. Just look at this stunning photo taken last week of the harvest moon by Justin Rogers in Boone County, Iowa. The corn harvest in Iowa slowed earlier this month due to snow and rain. Only about 29% of the corn in the state has been gathered at this point. Now taking a look at the drought monitor real quick, you can see there are no issues basically east of the Continental Divide. Still some problems out west. We'll have to see how the winter goes, see if those folks improve or not. I'll have your forecast coming up. First, here are some hometown temps.
Plan for the unexpected with weather forecast updates. Local forecasts are delivered right to your cell phone each morning, making planning a little bit easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
Harvest is rolling, but will yields stay in near record territory? We'll talk about that next at the Agribusiness Desk. And later, we're off to the Golden State, where researchers are looking for innovative ways to recharge California's aquifers. In Agribusiness, a better day Friday for grains. In fact, a pretty good day. Let's get an update from our friends on the floor of the CME.
Soybeans today recovered. The futures were oversold yesterday, and the market is acting like that possibly there's crop damage hiding. You know, perhaps it's because the harvest is slow and we don't know exactly what the numbers are going to be. The U.S. dollar was all over the market today, but it really started to end up lower. Maybe that helped a little bit, but certainly the overselling of yesterday's market really got something to come back to. Corn also rebounded, short covering coming in, perhaps following the wheat because the wheat had bounced back as well. But with with that corn, I think that there's been some serious buying strength that's holding this market up. It's still in a channel, and it got to the bottom of the channel. Some traders came in, a little bit of short covering, a little bit of bargain hunting, really strengthening that market. It was up 7, almost 8 cents today, so that's really strong for corn. Wheat did bounce back. Those bargain hunters really scrambled to jump on board and rallied the market, double digits, really strong. But yesterday it kind of was oversold too much. Cattle today was firm. The market was consolidating. These rising carcass values have packers adding to their supply and underpinning prices, keeping these live cattle futures right in the channel. Even though we're on the lower side, it kind of strengthened it a little bit. Feeders were mixed. The downslide has finally shored up because they were slipping a lot. The hogs have firmed up. The futures, are just not backing down right now. This disease is really serious and very contagious right now. The tariffs add to the heavy cap that will put on any kind of significant rally, but the market is staying right here, and it looks like that there's some hope that maybe somebody's going to blink here and start to open the pipeline so we can start to get some exports back and forth to China. We're going to stay right here until we hear something new.
As harvest rushes forward, there have been plenty of weather challenges this season, so are those top-end yields still rolling in? Tyne Morgan asks a question in today's analysis from the road.
Well, here now with Jared Creed, Pete Meyer. We're here from a harvested field in northern Illinois. Jared, the yields this year have been nothing but impressive. Do you think these yields stick? Do you think USDA is correct in their current estimates?
Soybeans, maybe a little bit of a question mark, but not much. Corn, I do think that there's a little bit more movement to the downside, specifically led from some western Corn Belt states, Iowa and Minnesota. Minnesota has hardly been adjusted all summer. Some real actual stats from boots on the ground. When you start looking at yield by harvested acre versus yield by actual tillable acre, there's quite a variance. And even on a harvested side, the yields compared to the last 2 years are down as much as 50 to 60 bushel an acre.
175 to 177 is our number. I think that's probably fair. I will disagree with Jared, though. I think the B number could be as high as 54.
But even if we do see us come down a little bit on the corn yield, let's look specifically at corn, do you think it changes the price action that much?
Oh, I think it did. We just noticed it in October that the yield came down a little bit. You got a little bit of a rally. What was that rally worth? I mean, 365 seemed to be the price in corn, and we traded up to 370. Now today, based on poor exports today, we're back down below that price. I think it adds a nickel, but don't think it's going to add 25 or 30 cents.
But even a little bit of a rally, should producers act upon it, Jared?
I think they're going to have an opportunity to really look at this year's crop, but don't be afraid to look out into 2019 at that point on any price rally, given a production problem on this year's crop.
Even when prices aren't that attractive right now?
For 2019, if you really do take a good hard look at the corn numbers, I think there's actually some decent money on the table. You've got every single futures month for the 2019 crop above $4 at this moment.
$4 is 10% higher than we are now.
All right, thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. Let's take a quick break and then we'll have a check of weather right here on Ag Day.
To contact Jared at JC Marketing Services, call 402-680-1744 or send him an email at creedjaredm@outlook.com. For more information on S&P Global Platts agricultural research and analysis, call 646-478-6465.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Here, meteorologist Mike Hoffman looking at rain over the past week. And Mike, really that kind of Gulf Coast seeing the majority of rain this week.
Yeah, and that was the remnants of Willa that came out of the Pacific. Some of that not actually shown on here as that continued on through Friday night and Saturday. And that would have fallen in parts of the southeast in that neighborhood, because this is actually through the previous Saturday through this past Friday afternoon. And taking a look, really a lot of the heavier stuff actually stayed offshore, but there were some places from Houston through New Orleans over into the panhandle of Florida that did end up with a couple, 3 inches of rain out of the remnants of Willa. The rest of the country just did not see a whole lot. And part of that is because of the jet stream. We're seeing troughiness in the east as we put the maps into motion. You'll see how continuous energy just keeps coming eastward and dropping that trough into the east, although on Wednesday there's kind of a temporary lull. That trough then moves to the east once again as the ridge builds along the west coast. This is a pretty good shot of cold air for this time of the year by the end of the week into the middle of the country, and that will shift eastward a little bit as we head through the week. But you'll notice how the ridge just off the east coast, that kind of keeps the east coast areas a little bit milder than elsewhere. You can see by early next week, a lot of the trough kind of shifts right into the middle of the country, continuing to bring in some colder air. So temperatures this week definitely going below normal for most of the middle of the country, all of the plains, the Mississippi Valley, western Ohio Valley, western and central Great Lakes. Above normal along the Atlantic seaboard in the southeast, as well as most of Florida, and also up the far northeastern seaboard. And you can see above normal also out west, mainly California, western Washington, western Oregon. As far as precipitation this week, we'll go above normal for the southern Mississippi Valley, eastern Texas, panhandle of Florida, all the way up the into the northeastern portions of the country, probably near normal, Great Lakes, northern plains, but from Nebraska southwestward below normal and above normal in the northwest. All right, November temperatures below normal in the middle of the country, above normal out west. Let's go on to December. Below normal in a pretty large area from the Great Lakes northeast all the way down into Texas and Louisiana. Above normal from western North Dakota throughout the western portions. January temperatures will shift that below normal area all the way through Florida, most of the southeast, and also above normal far northwestern plains into the northwest. Precipitation over the next 90 days, most of the Corn Belt, we're going to go near normal, above normal southeast, southwest, below normal far northeast and far northwest. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. Heading to Portland, Oregon, first of all, cloudy, a couple of showers around, high of 58 degrees. Waco, Texas, lots of sunshine, but comfortable, high of 83. And finally, Lexington, Kentucky, mostly cloudy skies. Could be a lingering shower, high of 59.
Looking for a new-to-you tractor? Machinery Pete has the latest pricing trends. That's coming up next. And later, can flooding fields help recharge aquifers in California? We'll look at the research today on In the Country.
AgDay, brought to you by Prosaro Fungicide from Bayer.
Looking for a deal on a used tractor? Machinery Pete is looking at trends in the dollars.
Used tractors in the 150 horsepower range, give or take, have been pretty strong. Now here's a look at my Machinery Pete Used Values Index quarterly report for third quarter 18, and you can see on my 1 to 10 rating scale, we're at 8.1, and we've been in that low 8 range for a couple years, so kind of at an elevated level. Now what I've been seeing at auction across color lines, strong pricing on good condition tractors. Now here's a picture of a Case IH Puma 140, 976 hours on it, and this sold on a farm auction September 8th in south central Minnesota, went for $61,000. Now a couple weeks before that, on a consignment auction August 22nd in west central Illinois, another Puma 140, this one with 850 hours and a loader, sold for $70,500. Now folks, those two Puma 140s are the highest auction prices I've seen in almost 4 years. Now if we switch to Massey, here's a picture of a 6485. This thing had 2,345 hours on it, sold on a farm auction August 25th up in northeast Iowa, and went for $63,500. Good solid price. And if we wrap up with green, here's a tractor I've highlighted before, but it was a John Deere 6430 Premium, 863 hours on it with a loader, sold on a farm auction in west central Ohio August 10th, and it went for $88,500, highest auction price in 4 years. So good condition tractors in this horsepower range under 100K, pretty hot.
All right, thanks Greg. When we come back, could flooding fields with river water be a sustainable solution in California?
In the Country, sponsored by the all-new Kubota Sidekick, a utility vehicle that lets you climb more, cover more, tow more, and enjoy more. Visit KubotaUSA.com.
Flooded fields, usually not a good thing when it comes to crops, but in California, researchers are trying to find out if adding a lot of water onto inactive farmland could have long-term benefits. The idea here is to see if that water can then replenish underground aquifers without harming the crops. Now, the study being conducted at vineyards, nut orchards, and alfalfa farms. The research becoming more important since the 2014 passage of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. It requires local agencies and people who use the groundwater to develop plans to manage those aquifers.
We're putting water on a dormant vineyard or at least post-harvest water on a vineyard that's about to go dormant. And the idea here is that, you know, we're not interrupting the agricultural operation, but we are impacting our ability to recharge groundwater. And with any luck, we'd like to see this become a lot more common practice in the area.
One pilot project involves flooding about 14 acres of vineyard with up to 500 acre-feet of river water each year. They expect to keep flooding the fields through early next month. New ideas to start your week. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Spend part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.